Mhm.
All right, we're good.
Hi, my name is Lynetta McIver, Director of Multicultural Outreach and Engagement, AARP, Louisiana. Before we start today's cooking show, I'd like to take a few minutes to thank you for joining our Wellness Wednesday classes throughout the year. Presently, our offices are closed due to the pandemic, but we're working together to bring events and activities to you such as this. We're happy you joined us today. Today, we're going to focus on holiday appetizers. Of course, you know the holiday season is our favorite time of the year, but we want to show you how to create appetizers to wow your guests this holiday season, and to also send us today a set of measuring spoons. You can email me your name and address at lmciver, MCIVER, at AARP.org. I'll also put my email in the chat to make sure you're sending it to the right place. So be sure to copy it down. You have a lot to look forward to today, a lot of different techniques, some great flavors, and I'm excited. I'm very excited, and we'll be sending an email to everybody to let you know our plans for 2022. So again, welcome everyone. And now Amber will explain a few technical tips to have the best experience during the show. Hello, Amber.
Hi, Miss Lynetta. Today we are going to be doing some different camera angles, but for the most part, we're going to be using our, I'll be spotlighting for everyone. Now, at any point, you can feel free to, in the top right-hand corner, there's a little view spot, and you can switch to the gallery view where you can see everybody in a grid. You'll have to click that yourself at the end of the class in order to see everyone as well. If you're working on using an iPad today, if you swipe over, you should be able to see the spotlight for everyone. At the bottom of your screen, you should see the chat function. We're going to be using that if you have any questions, comments, as we're working along throughout the cooking today. I'll be managing the chat to make sure that if you have any questions, we can ask Heather and stop her along the way, as well as feel free in the bottom left-hand corner, you can stop and start your video, as well as stop and start your mute and unmute yourself. If you want to ask any questions, you're welcome to at any point. I think that's it on those. I will be passing it over to Chef Heather, who will be cooking for us today.
Everybody, welcome. I am decked out in my Christmas accessories for our special holiday class. As Miss Lynetta and Amber mentioned, we're going to be doing some great holiday appetizers today. If anybody is cooking along, please feel free to write to us in the chat box, let Amber know, so we can keep track of you. And you can also, unmute yourself if you want to show us your screen at any point. That's great, but we also know sometimes you like to stay incognito, which is totally fine too. I'm going to go ahead and get started. But before I do, let me just give you a quick introduction for those of you who maybe this is your first time joining us for one of these classes. My name is Chef Heather. I am the Director of Operations for the Goldring Center for Culinary Medicine here in New Orleans. We are the teaching kitchen for Tulane University. We teach medical students all about healthy cooking and nutrition by having them come in for hands-on cooking classes. We also teach the same kind of lessons to members of the community through our free cooking classes. So, definitely if you're not familiar with us or you've never taken a class with us and you think you might be interested, Amber can she's putting probably some links in the chat right now. You can definitely go on our website and find out more information about our program, as well as you can go back and look at all of the recipes that we've done this year for these AARP Wellness Wednesday sessions. So that's a fun little treat for you as well. Okay, so let's get started. We're gonna change up the flow of the class today a little bit. So if you've been with us before, we usually start with a little bit of like an Ask the Chef session, and then we go into cooking. I'm actually going to reverse it this time, and we're going to do our little Ask the Chef at the end when we work on our cheese and charcuterie board setup and display. So we're going to start with our recipes first. If anyone is cooking along, or if you're going to watch this and cook along later, the order in which we're going to do things, we're going to work on our onion bacon jam, because that's going to take a little bit of time to get going. And then we are going to get our nuts going on the stove, and then we will work on our spinach and artichoke dip. That one doesn't really take too long in the oven, so I'm going to save that one till closer to the end. And then finally, we will make our little mini tarts, and we will then finish up with our cheese and charcuterie board. We got a lot to get done today, so I'm going to get right into it. I want to preheat my oven to 350, and I'm also going to go ahead and turn my stove on for my onion jam. So I have a Dutch oven here on my back burner. If Amber can add my stove cam, you'll be able to see that. I'm going to go ahead and put that on about a medium-high flame. Please excuse the fact that my pan has some brown spots in it. It means that it has gotten a lot of love over the years. I really like using the Dutch oven. It's an enameled cast iron. You could use a cast iron skillet. You can use pretty much any like heavy duty pan that you have will be a good bet for the onion bacon jam situation. I actually already went ahead and chopped up my 2 slices of bacon. So this is just 2 slices of bacon. I chopped them into about like 1/4 inch length pieces. And I'm going to get them in the pan as soon as my pan gets a little bit hot. I got my oven going. What else do I need to do? I'm going to also go ahead and cut up one more onion for you. So this recipe calls for 2 pounds of onion. I went ahead and sliced up most of it. I'm just going to show you one for good measure so that we can go over how exactly you would want to cut this for this recipe. So let me just tilt this down so y'all can see here. So I've got my onion. The first step whenever we're dealing with an onion is always to take off the stemmy end. We're going to keep that root end intact for now. So we're going to go ahead and cut that off. I always have, you can't see it, it's out of view, but I always have a little bowl standing by to collect my scraps. Now I have a nice flat surface to work on, which is perfect. I'm going to go ahead and slice directly through the root, giving myself 2 halves. That gives me that nice, easy, peelable situation. And then I got to try to get all this papery skin off. Sometimes it wants to be stubborn. I was having some issues earlier. One thing that we tell people in our kitchen is if you are someone who cries easily with onion, there's 2 good tricks, that you can try. And I'm not going to guarantee that this will always work, but the first one is that you can store your store your onion in the refrigerator, or at the very least, throw it in the refrigerator right before you're going to cut it. Put a little chill on it. That can help. The main thing you need to do is be quick about it. So once you get to be better at this, you become quicker and it makes life easy and you'll cry less. Okay, so I've got my onion half here. I'm now going to go ahead and take off the root end on both of my pieces. And then we are looking for a julienne or a thin strip. Oftentimes people will think to go ahead and, cut in this direction here. I just want to show you why we actually don't do it this way. So if you break this apart into the little individual pieces, you're going to see that what I have here is a whole bunch of different sizes going on. So they're all the same width, which is good, but I've got this little tiny piece here and I've got this big piece here. That means it's not going to cook nicely and evenly. And for something like this recipe, I really want nice, even cooking. So I'm actually going to flip it the other direction and I'm going to cut it this way. If you look at the onion, you can always see that it has these lines. I'm going to follow the direction of those lines. Now, when I do this, I don't want to make it too thin. I don't want it to burn. So I want to be mindful of that. Once I get a little bit more than halfway, when it gets to be about this size, I like to knock it over on its side because that gives me a more stable piece to work with. I'll just add that there to my rest of my onion. Now, another thing I want to mention here is that I actually have a batch of this jam already made. And that is the jam I'm going to use when I do my tart filling, because I'm not 100% sure that this will be all the way done in time. So just keep that in mind. This is the deal. The trick to really nice caramelization of onion is that we want to do it low and slow. So we don't want to rush the process. You know, doing it low and slow is going to give us that nice caramelized flavor. We also have another little trick, which is that we're going to salt the onions on the earlier side. Doing that is going to make it does make it take a little longer, but ultimately we're going to get more even cooking, better flavor. So we're going to salt it early. Let me see. I think my pan is probably hot. I'm going to go ahead and toss this bacon in. All right. You know, this recipe, I really like this because we're showing you that you can still have something like bacon and be fairly healthy. You know, we're using 2 strips of bacon for this entire recipe. We're going to get a 2-cup yield out of this recipe. And when you use this product, you're not using a cup of it at a time, right? Like you're using it in very small doses. And because we cut that bacon really small, let me give it a quick stir. Already smelling good. Because we cut it really small, we're stretching it out throughout the recipe. So it's a great little tip or technique. It works the same if you're doing something like with, you know, sausage, which is another product we know it's really high in fat, often high in sodium. So we can use less of it and just make sure that we crumble it up very, very small to spread it out and get that flavor throughout our dish. I will also just mention that some of the things that we are working on today overall as like the theme is how we can utilize some maybe like store-bought ingredients, combining them with homemade things. I think one of the things that people sometimes get worked up about at the holidays is like they got to make every single thing from scratch. You know, that's not really the most realistic. It would be great if we can save ourselves some trouble and rely on some store-bought stuff, combine it with the homemade to get the most bang for your buck. And then you're still going to impress your guests, but you're going to have less stress and have more fun. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we are going to be thinking about how we can make our appetizers a little bit on the lighter side. So I know in the pre-class questions, you were asked about when do you usually make appetizers? Do you serve it before a main, you know, meal? Or do you just use it as like party food where you're just at the whole entire party is just appetizers, appetizers, appetizers? I think from the responses, most people fall into that camp of, you know, serving a lot of appetizers as the meal. So here, you know, we can definitely, you're going to see this spread that I have today is going to be pretty substantial. But if you are serving it before a main meal, you know, you want to think about keeping it lighter. You don't want people to fill up so much that they can't eat the meal at the end of the day. So that's something to think about. And we're going to show you with each of these recipes how we've taken some steps to either lighten it up or what we've done to kind of keep a more nutritious eye on things. Let me check on this bacon, give it another quick stir, getting nice and brown. The other great thing about using bacon like this is that I'm going to be able to have my bacon fat serve as my fat for the dish. I don't need to add any additional oil. I'm just going to leave that in there and it's going to be the perfect amount for me to saute my onions in. I need to, my little backdrop is bothering me. I want to move it over. Okay. See my beautiful AARP backdrop. Okay. So let's see. What else do we need to say about this, Amber? Does anybody have any questions or do we have any thoughts as we're getting started here?
So I did hear that Barbara will be cooking along, except for this onion bacon jam, which is very exciting. I always love when people are cooking along. And then I really just want to like really talk about for this bacon jam. I love it. I use it on everything. Heather made it last year for a holiday situation, and it really is super versatile to put on just about anything. We're always talking about with our participants on what things that we can use instead of a traditional condiments. So this is a really great way that we can add in a lot of flavor to a lot of dishes without having any type of real concern about just covering something in mayonnaise or mustard, and it holds forever. So it's not just good for crackers and cheese. It's my favorite thing, Heather, is putting this on like a fancy grilled cheese, is what I like to call them, or on your like morning eggs. Delicious.
Yes, I agree. Fancy grilled cheese is the way to go. All right, I got the bacon out. It's getting kind of smoky. I'm gonna just turn my heat down just a little bit. I'm sorry I don't have a slotted spoon, so I had to like make it work there, but hopefully you can see it's nice and crisp, but not overdone. It's gonna get some more time in later, so I don't wanna go crazy with it. I'm gonna go ahead and just dump all my onions in. Give them a good stir just to get them coated in that fat. I will say, you know, I'm using this wider. I have two versions of this Dutch oven. One is a smaller round, and this is my bigger one. I did decide to go with the bigger pan today because another trick with this caramelization is that you cannot overcrowd the pan. So you'll see, I mean, that pan's pretty crowded, but if I had put that in my smaller dish, I would have had onions stacked up to here. I do need to give them some space to kind of like spread out and do their thing. Okay, so those are gonna go for a little bit.
Heather,
yeah.
if you're going to make this vegetarian, what would you do? Would you substitute a spice, or what would you do instead of the bacon? I feel like
I mean, yeah, you could do that. I mean, the bacon definitely adds a little smokiness, but I honestly think you could just leave it out. And I don't think it would be bad. You would just get more of the, you know, umami flavor from the onion. And I would just make sure you really let them go low and slow and caramelize. You could adjust the spice once it's done, because you're gonna see we're gonna add a bunch of sweet stuff to this, like apple cider. We got a little bit of brown sugar. We're gonna balance that with a little apple cider vinegar and then some thyme, some fresh thyme. I think like what I would do is I would leave the mushrooms, maybe. I don't know. I personally don't think I would enjoy that flavor, but like if that speaks to you, I say go for it. I would probably leave it out. Just start with your onions, do a little drizzle of oil, get them going. Once you have everything going and it's like jammy and caramelized, go ahead and taste it and see at that point, like, just do you want to add a little bit more herb? Do you want to add maybe some smoked paprika to it to balance out some of that sweet flavor? But you also might decide you really like the sweet flavor and you're like good with it. Okay, let me go ahead and get my salt in. Now, this recipe is one of the only times you will see us at Gold Ring use this much salt. That was just a full teaspoon of salt going in. But as I mentioned, this makes quite a lot. And we are going to make sure, you know, we're serving it in small doses here. So hopefully you can see I am starting to get a little bit of browning on the edges of the onions. I just want to keep an eye on it. As I said, the idea here is to go low and slow, so I don't want to go too crazy. I think that's looking good. I am going to go ahead and stick my cover on the pan and keep it at a medium heat. And I'm going to keep an eye on that for about 10 minutes. Amber, I'm going to need you to help me today with some timer action. So if you could mind the time a little bit for me on that 10 minutes, that would be super helpful. While we wait for that to go, we can go ahead and get started on our maple rosemary spiced nuts, excuse me. So these are really fun. This is one of my favorite things to make at the holiday time, partially because we can use this recipe in so many ways. So today I am going to sprinkle a little bit of these nuts onto some of my mini tarts. I can also just add them as a nut option on my cheese board or cheese plate. The really cool thing is you can also package these up to gift them to people at the holidays. I'm making this recipe as written, which is 1 cup of nuts, but you can absolutely scale it up, scale it down. When I did the test batch of the mini tarts, for example, I cut everything in half and just made a little mini batch because I didn't really need a bunch of extra nuts around, although they are so delicious. I probably should have just done it so we could have more snacks. But this is such a great versatile recipe. Today, we're going to be using rosemary, cinnamon, nutmeg, and a little cayenne with the salt. So that's what we got going on with the maple syrup. You could also customize this, you know, with your own favorite spices. If you like really spicy, you can always add more cayenne. There's a lot of options here. So I'm starting with nuts. I'm going to show you like my little setup here. So I've got a cup of nuts. These are pecans I went with today. And I just roughly chop these. So there are some pieces, you know, you do kind of want them to be fairly even. But for this purpose, I did want them to be smaller since I am going to use them on my tarts. But if you are gifting these or just want them as a snack, you could always just do whole pecans or like these pecan halves and not chop them up. I also then have a 1/4 cup of maple syrup here. And then I've got my spices. So I've got my cinnamon, nutmeg, cayenne, salt, and then some fresh rosemary. So this is very simple. We're going to take this over to the stove and we're going to throw it all in the pan and we're going to stir it around. And we're going to, again, kind of take it low and slow and let it do its thing. So I'm going to just move over here. I will just take a peek at these little onions, make sure they're not going too fast. They're looking good. The cover, the lid, you know, this helps speed up the process a little bit. It's going to give us a little bit of steam action, which is going to help. Let me just wipe out this skillet now because I just dripped some stuff in there. All right, so let's go ahead and get this one on. We'll do about medium heat here. And then I'm going to do like medium low actually, because that's what my recipe says. So I'm going to go ahead and put my nuts in. What's nice about this is that I don't have to pre-toast these nuts because they're going to get toasted in this process. I am just going to go ahead and break these up just a little more so I can make sure they're fairly even. All right, we'll go ahead in with our maple syrup. And then I'm going to add all my spices and just stir everything around. This could not be easier, really. One thing I would like to mention is that in this recipe, if you look at the back of our recipes, we always have our nutrition labels on there for you. And this recipe is going to tell you that there is no added sugar in the recipe. That is because the software that we use to analyze our nutrition does not count maple syrup as an added sugar. It counts it as a natural sugar. And while that isn't necessarily wrong, it just wants you to be mindful that technically this dish does have added sugar. So maple syrup, it is a natural sugar, right? It's from nature. But when we're really thinking about sugar content in our food, we want to be mindful that, you know, in fact, we are adding this maple syrup to the dish. The difference would be if we were looking at something like an apple or some strawberries, right? Those sugars truly are natural because they come in the complete package with fiber attached. And that's why we would recommend things like, you know, sugar that comes from fruit more than eating tons and tons of, you know, any, you know, processed sugar, maple syrup, honey, agave. At the end of the day, all of those products are sugar, and we do need to make sure we're consuming them in moderation. Now, hopefully you can see that was getting some bubbly action going, which is great. That's what we want. The recipe is going to explain to you that we are going to go through 3 stages of this sugar process. So we're going to have it be thin and liquidy, which is what it's doing now. Hopefully y'all can see that it's bubbling away. At that point, we want to stir it every like 1 to 2 minutes. Then it's going to start getting thick and glazy. At that point, we would want to stir more like every minute. We want to break up the clumps as much as possible. And then eventually it's going to go back. It's going to go to being like kind of crystallized and grainy. So it's definitely going to have that texture you're thinking of when you think of a candied nut. And once we do that, we're going to transfer it onto a baking sheet that's lined with parchment paper to let it cool. Okay, so Amber, if you want to go over back, you can get rid of my face for a little bit. We can hopefully see this bubbling away, bubble, bubble, bubble. It's looking great. It smells delicious. It's very, like, this is so, I can't even believe, I don't know. I feel like this dish, every time I make it, it amazes me because it's just so tasty. And it's really not difficult. It's just a matter of being patient and keeping a little bit of an eye on it. Let's just peek our onions. All right, onions are looking good. I just need to run over here and open my door because it's about 1,000 million degrees in my house now. Although that might not help because I know here in New Orleans, it's a hot, hot day. Certainly doesn't quite feel like Christmas weather. All right, so you can see that we're getting a little bit closer to that syrupy, thick kind of situation. All right, looking good. Amber, how am I doing on time?
2 minutes, 40 seconds.
Okay. I am going to start talking while I wait for that to do its thing. Let's start talking a little bit about our next dish, which is going to be our spinach and artichoke dip. Oh, one more thing about that recipe with the whole sugar situation. Oh, let's give it a, I can see we're getting that thick, syrupy coating. You know, one of the good things about using nuts is that nuts are full of healthy fats and fiber. So that does ultimately help balance out the sugar, you know, the blood sugar spike that we would get from eating something coated in maple syrup. The other thing to keep in mind is the serving size on this as well. So for this recipe, I used a 1/4 cup of maple syrup. This is going to be 4 servings of nuts, which they're going to be pretty substantial servings. And that means that I'm only really looking at a tablespoon of sugar per serving. So when you put it into context that way, I think it does sort of help make it seem a little bit less unhealthy, at least. I want to get this good syrupy, yum yum. I'm going to use 2 spatulas. All right, looking great. I am going to turn it down just a little bit so we don't go too crazy with it. I'm excited to talk about spinach and artichoke dip because we did notice that it was definitely one of the very popular things that came up in the questions that we had on the registration link. So I know that this is a dish that people really enjoy and like to serve as an appetizer. I will say, you know, maybe this version will be a little bit different from what you're used to. Hopefully you will give it a try and see how you feel about it. Amber, you can feel free to just not show my face. Totally fine right now. I'm just going to talk about a little bit of our setup because I want people to be able to see those nuts as they go through this stage. So you can just hear my voice coming out of the sky, basically. So spinach artichoke dip. Obviously, we're going to have spinach. Today, I'm using frozen spinach, very convenient. I am also going to use, for my artichokes, very convenient canned artichokes. Makes life easy, right?
Heather, that's your alarm.
Okay, sweet. let's check on those onions then. And, oh, my nuts are looking so good. All right. All right, we did, oh no. We got a little bit darker than I would have liked, but it's gonna be okay. I'm gonna make it work. So hopefully you can see that for the most part, we've just got this nice, very light golden color. I'm gonna go ahead in with the rest of my stuff now. So I've got a cup of apple cider, 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and then I've got my chopped fresh thyme here. I think that was a tablespoon.
Yes.
Go ahead and give this a stir. I'm also gonna go ahead now and add my little bacon back in. All right, let's just get all this out of the way. All right, and I'll be honest, there are some pieces in there that I don't really love the way the color is looking, but what I'm gonna do, because I'm not overly concerned about it like ruining the dish, I probably will just keep an eye out, and once this cooks down more, I will probably just fish those pieces out that are the most dark. Hopefully you can see on these nuts, they really are getting closer to that. They're very sticky. You see they're clumping. They're smelling very good. I do want to turn those onions back up just a bit because I would like to get some bubbling going on the liquid. I can start to see it right there. How long do we need to let that go for now? We go as long as we can.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna go as long as we can. So I'm gonna leave that going on the stove. We'll just keep revisiting it, keep checking on it every so often. All right. Nuts to stir. I'm gonna grab my tray that I have prepared for these to go on. So I just have this parchment lined little baking sheet. The parchment is just going to make sure that we don't have stickage. Parchment is definitely one of those things that might seem kind of like a fancy thing to have on hand, but honestly, it is so versatile. We obviously use it very often in the teaching kitchen, but I do find myself using it at home more and more. You know, you can certainly use it as a lining when you bake cookies, you know, a nice non-stick coating so that you don't have any issues with your cookies. You can even use it, you know, anytime you're roasting vegetables or anything on a sheet tray, it does make a great liner. I know a lot of times we tend to think of using foil, but parchment paper is really great as well. Yum. Okay, everything is smelling so good. All right, so while we wait for those nuts to finish up, I'm just gonna leave it like that. I can leave that spatula like that because it's silicone, so I know it's not gonna melt on me. It has a high heat rating. Let's just review what the other ingredients that we're gonna have today. So we have our spinach, we have our artichoke hearts, we have some light or low fat cream cheese. We've got Greek yogurt. That is something that's a little bit different that you may not be used to seeing in a spinach artichoke dip. Oftentimes we're gonna see sour cream, mayonnaise, but Greek yogurt is gonna give us a little bit of that nice, delicious creaminess. We get a little tang from it, and it's lighter and less saturated fat, so we like that. We're also gonna have Parmesan and mozzarella today. You know, we're not skimping too much on the cheese. I definitely feel like we've added extra Parmesan in particular. And part of that is because we know it gives us some really great flavor. So we definitely want to make sure we don't skimp on that. And a little goes a long way with things like Parmesan. Parmesan is a lot like bacon in that way. We can use, you know, a moderate amount and get a big bang for our buck flavor-wise. Okay, while I wait for those nuts, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my microwave safe bowl that has my cream cheese in it, and I am going to put this in the microwave for 1 minute. Ideally here, I'm not trying to cook it. I'm just trying to like thin it out a bit or get it a little more loose and pliable so that this can be the basis of the recipe. So this is just a block of cream cheese, bottom of my bowl. I'm gonna stick this in the microwave for a minute. Now, the other thing I already did. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and dump these out. They are definitely going to, oops, wrong one. They are definitely going to be very sticky. I don't know if this one here, I'll burn it. But I'm gonna try to spread them out as much as I can. Once they cool, we'll be able to break them up even further. Just gonna try to get that off. Ooh, hot. Okay, so we'll set these aside, let them cool. Hopefully you can see them. Yeah. All right. So I do need to chop up a few more of my artichoke hearts. Excuse me. Okay, so you can buy the can of artichoke hearts that is already chopped. I would recommend that personally, but if excuse me, sorry, got a little smoky. If if all you can find is these ones that come whole like this in the can, it's not a big deal. You can easily chop these up. All right, let me set this aside. Whoops, let me not set it there so it doesn't fall. So all I need to do with this is cut it in half. And cut it in half again lengthwise and then chop across like that. You just want little tiny bite-sized pieces. So adding this step will, add a few more minutes to the prep, but not really a big deal overall because this is a very simple recipe. All right, so we got our chopped artichoke hearts. I already took care of my spinach. I put my frozen back spinach in a bowl, covered it with plastic wrap, and microwaved it for 5 minutes. And really that was just to get it nice and soft. The only thing I want to do is I do want to check to make sure it doesn't have a bunch of moisture. It definitely does. So I think what I'll do is actually grab like a clean kitchen towel and wring it through that. I'm sure we've all done this one before. All right, I'm just gonna dump it and then carry it over to my sink and just give it a squeeze. That's just gonna help our finished dip not be too watery. Oh yeah, so much water's coming out of there.
Now, Heather, with this dish, I know we were talking a little bit about prep in advance. This is one of those dishes that if we were to try to make, could we meal prep this? And if we did, or like prep this before an event, would you want to, like what stage would you freeze it?
So I'm actually gonna do that today. I'm just giving this a stir, making sure it's soft enough, this cream cheese. Kind of beating it up a little bit. I am going to take half of my dip and put it in a ramekin to bake off today and serve with my cheese plate. But then I'm going to split it and do it in 2 smaller dishes. And I'm going to, once it's assembled, that's when I'm going to freeze it. And then when I want to serve it later, maybe like New Year's or something, I can just pull it out and pop it in the oven. It'll just take a little bit longer to bake, but it should work just fine. Okay, soft cream cheese. Now we're gonna add everything else in. So we have the artichoke hearts. Let me grab my wad of spinach. This really did, I lost a lot of moisture, so this was a good idea. Whew. This does make a mess when you do this. Obviously now I have a spinach covered kitchen towel, but it's okay. All right, spinach, artichoke. What else we need? We need, where's my tray? Oh, here it is. Lost track of my tray. Okay. Oh, I lost some spinach. Get in there. Okay, I'm gonna add my 1/4 cup Greek yogurt. And then I am going to not add all of the cheese inside. I definitely want to save some of my cheese for topping. So I'm going to keep that in mind. I have a 1/2 cup of each of the 2 different kinds of cheeses we're using, the Parmesan and the mozzarella. The other thing is, if you wanted to add a different kind of cheese to this, like, feel free, do your thing. Swiss cheese might be fun. I think, you know, whatever cheese you like or have on hand, go for it. Last couple of things, we need our salt. I have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I have a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder. And then I have about a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes. We have on the recipe that you can use up to a 1/2, but that it is certainly optional. So you can do what feels right to you in terms of your love of spice. And now I am just going to get this all mixed together. Super easy.
Heather, another thing I really love from the comments on what people really like to make for appetizers is a lot of people talked about loving different types of dips and serving it with a lot of different types of chips, whether it be corn or potato based. And so I like that we've talked a lot, and on this recipe, it mentions those homemade tortilla chips as a great option to be served with this.
Do you mean these homemade tortilla chips?
Oh my goodness, those are
They got a little brown. I made them this morning. But yeah, if you want to talk about these, Amber, well, I just finished stirring and then I'm gonna get this divided up between my dishes. The other thing is, I will say this is a great vehicle too for using your like veggie sticks. So your carrot, your little celery sticks, you know, yes, there's tons of veggies in here, but more veggies certainly didn't ever hurt anybody. So I think it's nice to think about adding extra color and texture in that way too. But yeah, why don't you tell them about those chips while I just finish this up?
So these are definitely chips that I know that we have some people that have been on this class before. These are the tortilla chips, the homemade tortilla chips that we're always talking about. They are on that main AARP Wellness Wednesday link. I'm adding it again in the chat this is the link where it's every resource that we've used to date. Oh, I sent it twice because it's just that great. But we've used these corn tortilla chips a few times and they're really awesome as far as having a quick, easy snack on hand, and you can add any type of flavoring. So this is a really easy way that we could add maybe some extra spice or some Creole seasoning, or make them, I really like a little bit like nutritional yeast and garlic, so that way they're more of like a cheesy flavor. But ultimately, these chips are a really easy way to have a super easy, inexpensive snack or dip option, not dip mechanism, I guess, for eating these dips. And so for these, they're literally just tortilla chips that we cut into a few pieces, bake them in the oven, and they get nice and crispy. And then they're really convenient with any of these types of recipes that we have.
Yeah, so we use the corn tortillas that you can buy in, you know, like a huge stack. And you think to yourself, when am I ever going to use all these corn tortillas? But the good news is they keep in your fridge forever. And you can do so many things with them, right? Like you can definitely use them to make your tacos. You can definitely make some enchiladas, or like an enchilada casserole situation is always kind of fun. But they make great chips. So yeah, this morning I actually even took like the super easy route where I cut them into wedges and then I laid them all flat on the tray, gave it a spritz of my nonstick cooking spray, and then sprinkle my salt, and then pop them in the oven. Easy peasy. Okay, what I have going on here, I just want to show you. So instead of baking this in one large dish, I split it up into two, and then I'm holding a little on the side. This is the portion that I'm going to use to fill some of my little mini tarts. So I'm going to set that to the side. These two I have available for baking. I'm going to put a lid on this and pop this in the freezer, and then this one's going to go in the oven now. Oh, I got to top it with my extra cheese. Can't forget that step. Very important, crucial. Okay, so let me add a little extra mozzarella. Now, I will say I did use like the block mozzarella. Alexa, shh, be quiet. Sorry, my Alexa thinks I'm talking to her. Oh my gosh. I'll turn her off. Now she's gonna play music.
Technology is great until it doesn't work.
Alexa.
Or it works too well.
Okay, anyway, I used the block of mozzarella and shredded that myself on my little box grater. I will say I do, you know, I'm not always opposed to using like convenience products like a pre-shredded cheese. You know, look, it is much easier, obviously, to buy that bag of cheese. And oftentimes it's the same price as if you buy the block. I will say this, though, the texture and the flavor that you get from the shredding it yourself is going to be superior. When they do the pre-shredded, you know, they add some things to it so that it doesn't cake up. And ultimately, it does sort of change things. So just keep that in mind. I also feel like the block tends to like keep for longer. So that was my other reason for doing that. I'm going to go ahead and pop this baby in the oven.
Heather, while we're over there, can we check out the onion and...
Yeah, it's bubbling away. I actually had an issue because I realized my flame went out, but I turned it back on. I've got it bubbling. You can
It really cooked down.
Yeah, it cooks down the color. Now, at this point, you definitely leave the lid off because part of what we want to see is evaporation here. So I want to see some of this excess liquid evaporating as the time goes on. All right, let me grab, I'm going to set this aside. This is going to be my freezer. I can pull that out. I think New Year's Eve sounds like a great time, actually, to pull my little extra batch of dip. I mean, as you see, it makes quite a lot that spinach dip does. So you have plenty to work with. You know, if you're serving a big crowd, you'll be good to go. And if not, you can split it up like I did. All right, I think we're gonna move on now to our little mini tarts. I'm gonna get rid of this cutting board. Now, these are really fun. I'm very excited about this. Let me show you what all I got here. I got a lot of stuff. Okay. I had to use just about every dish in my house to like consolidate things and keep things straightened out. Okay, here's what we got. These are some of our fillings that we're going to be working with. So here's my jar of my onion bacon jam, the last batch I made. You can kind of get a sense of what it's going to look like at the end. As I mentioned, these make for great, you know, it's a great gift. You can use, this is an 8-ounce jar, but you can certainly even get those little shorter, squattier, like little babies, if you wanted to give a lot of little batches to people as a gift. All right, so I got that. I'm gonna pair that. I'm gonna pair this guy with some crumbled blue cheese. This definitely has some nice umami richness, but it is also a little sweet. So I'm gonna pair it with this blue cheese to give it something to really counterbalance. Now, these are all recommendations at the end of the day. If you don't like blue cheese, you can pair this with goat cheese. You can pair this with the brie. You can pair this with cheddar. Like, you can literally do whatever you want, whatever you like. This is just my choice today. So bacon, onion jam, blue cheese. That's going to be one combo. My next combo, I'm going to do this goat cheese. This is a fresh goat cheese, which I'm going to talk a lot more at the end about all these different cheeses. But this is a fresh goat cheese or a chev, and I just crumbled it up a little bit. I'm going to pair this with those maple rosemary spice nuts, which are just about cooled off, and they're nice and sticky. I'm going to let them cool maybe just a little bit longer, but ideally now I can break them off into little smaller clusters that I'll be able to use as tart toppers. Now, of course, you can leave it into like bigger chunks like this for gifting or for serving, but I would say if you're serving it and putting it in a bowl, like, or on your cheese board for people to munch at, I would probably break it up a bit. Oh, I'm excited for this. Okay, so that's gonna go with my goat cheese. And then my last combination, probably, I'm gonna be honest, is my favorite. This is gonna be my brie and cranberry. So this is literally just canned cranberry. It's the whole berry variety. What I did was I dumped out the can into a bowl that I could like actually stir it around. I don't know if you are aware, but when you have that kind of cranberry, it comes out where all the like whole berry pieces are sort of at one end and all the jelly pieces are at the other end. So I like to stir it around so that I get this nice mixture here. And then today I had bought a little round. This is actually Camembert. I'll talk more later about the difference between Camembert and brie, but it is very similar to a brie. You see, it's nice and squishy in the middle. I will say all of this cheese, I've had it sitting out for a little bit. I think that's important to note. You definitely want to give it some time. You don't want to be serving your guests like really cold cheese. What I need to do with this is just cut it into some small little cubes. So let's see. Oh, he's a little soft. We're going to make it work. And I am just going to cut it on this paper so that I don't mess up my board. Woo! All right. So really the idea here is you want, you know, little like 1/2 inch or so pieces. You just need to be able to fit it inside your little tarts. And I'm going to show you the tart shells in a second. I think actually that's going to be enough to do what I need to do right now. The last thing I have is some fresh chopped herbs. So as you know, I put some rosemary in the nuts and I had some fresh thyme in the onion jam. I just have a little extra of both of those things that I'm going to use as little garnishes and toppers. All right, so let me get my tart shells out of the freezer. Okay, if you've never worked with these before, I would highly recommend seeking them out. I will say, right before Thanksgiving, we had a little trouble finding these, but we have recently found them at both Rouse's and Winn-Dixie. And I know I'm not supposed to name drop, but I know that those are, you know, are like standard grocery stores here in the New Orleans area. So I just want to mention that you can definitely, should be able to find these there. What these are is they are little pre-made tart shells made of phyllo dough. Now, if you're not familiar with phyllo dough, it is a very thin, flaky pastry. Hopefully you can kind of tell it's very thin, flaky. The thing that we really like about it, not only is that it's just like delicious and it tastes good, is that it's very low fat. So if you cannot find these, your next best bet is probably going to be to use puff pastry. I will say I did this with puff pastry and it is not too difficult. I would not necessarily, if you're looking for easy and quick and lighthearted, I would not recommend making little cups out of phyllo pastry yourself, because phyllo pastry is notoriously very difficult to work with. It is finicky. It is very delicate. You have to keep it covered with a wet towel. You have to make sure that you are brushing it with some type of oil or fat between the layers. It tears easily. I personally don't want all that headache. So I'm going for the pre-made little babies. These are also very cost effective, incidentally. Or I will just do the puff pastry. The thing you got to keep in mind with the puff pastry is it does have extra fat. You know, it's a laminated dough with lots of layers of, it's going to get nice and flaky and puffy. So just be mindful of that. If you buy a sheet of puff pastry, you just spread it out on your board, give it a quick roll to kind of flatten it out. Then you're going to take it and you're going to cut it into little squares, looking at like a little mini muffin pan, how big you want to make your squares so that it's big enough to fit inside. You just press the squares down into the pan, fill them, bake them just as if you were filling these and baking them. So it's not too difficult, but it is one extra step. I really like these. That's what I'm going with today, but just know you do have that option.
Heather,
What's really cool. Yeah, go ahead.
question. So for those, in the recipe, the mix and match mini tart on actual paper, there's a picture of these tarts. I believe that the ones in the back are that puff pastry.
That is a great point for anybody that's curious as to what those look like. You are absolutely right. The one in the front is the cranberry brie option in the phyllo, and the ones in the back were made with the puff pastry. We definitely wanted to test that, so we weren't recommending something that we weren't sure if it was going to be good. And they were delicious, but it definitely is a little bit of a different situation. All right, let me go ahead because I don't want to run out of time. Let me go ahead and start filling. We can keep talking. Amber, if there's anything you want to chime in on, maybe from the chat or anything else that we want to say, I'm going to go ahead and start filling these up, and I'll kind of tell you what I'm doing as I go. But basically, you know, I'm using a teaspoon. As you see, these are very small. I also have a half teaspoon at the ready because you don't want to go crazy. You can't overfill these things and you'll end up being sad because they make a big mess. I gotta can you remind me to check on that dip too, Amber, maybe in like about 5-ish minutes?
You got it.
Okay, so first combo, I'll do the onion jam. I will say for both the onion jam and the cranberry, I like to put this liquidy stuff. Oh, I'm lying. Okay, I like for the onion jam, I like to put the onion jam in the bottom and then top it with the cheese. And you see, I'm only putting just a tiny little bit. I will say I am making it a point to try to get at least one little piece of bacon in there. Okay. Then I'm going to top that with a little blue cheese crumble. What I'm going to do with the other one is I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to put the cheese in the bottom and the cranberry on the top. We tried it both ways. That way definitely comes out a little better. So got my little blue cheese here, and I'm just going to literally put like one little crumble. This, you know, it's finicky, takes a little time, but we can also do this in advance. We can do it in advance to the point where we freeze them. That definitely is an option. These boxes contain 14 of these tarts, but you can certainly buy double, you know, make a double batch, spend your time doing that. Amber, do you want to real quickly come over here to these onions? I just want to show what they're looking like now. I would say these actually look better than that batch I have in the jar in terms of like the deep color that we were able to get here. And you see that most of my liquid is evaporated and it's definitely got that jammy consistency. Now, I will say these continue to kind of jam up further once they sit and get cool. I actually think what I'm going to do is give it a quick taste and see if I'm happy, and I might go ahead and just turn that heat off. Oh yeah. All right. Heat's going off. Hopefully at the end I'll have enough time to kind of show you what that looks like as it cools. All right, back to the tarts. Next, got my little brie / camembert, putting a little square in the bottom of each one of these. I will say this is my favorite combo, so I'm going to make 6 of those. All right, now I'll just use my little half teaspoon and give each one a little thing of cranberry. Now I will say I did think I noticed in the pre-class questionnaire that this was a combo that was not new to people. Seemed like some other people had done you know, a brie and cranberry or some kind of cheese and cranberry situation. You know, I think it really works. Also, you know, maybe you have a can of cranberry hanging around in your pantry that you didn't use at Thanksgiving. It's definitely nice. You got the, you know, you've got that tart, but also sweet. I'm going to go back now and just add a little garnish to these. So I do like a little bit of rosemary on the cranberry brie ones. And I'll add a little bit of extra fresh thyme on these other babies because we had the fresh thyme in the onion jam. Very cute, very cute. Okay, what do we got next? Oh, spinach artichoke dip. Okay, so easy. Just gonna take my spinach artichoke dip and I'm gonna put about a teaspoon in my little tart. And then ideally you would probably top this with a little extra Parmesan cheese. I think I'm gonna skip it right now only because I know I'm short on time and I don't have it already shredded up, but yum, yum, delish. Okay, now we'll do the last one, which is gonna be the goat cheese and nutty option. All right, goat cheese in first. Just a little crumble. And again, like I said, you can mix and match these, you know, they're called mix and match for a reason. But if you like a certain kind of cheese and want to stick with that for all of them, feel free, do your thing. All right, so I'm just gonna make sure that each one of these has a couple little pieces of those spiced nuts. The great news about this is that once these are assembled, they take like hardly no time at all to bake. They're very quick. So yes, this part is a little tedious, a little finicky, but once we go to do it, once we go to pop them in the oven, we're basically done.
All right, Heather, that's your timer for, I don't remember.
Yeah. All right, got my little dip action. I will say, if I was doing this for a party, I would actually turn my broiler on and probably pop this under the broiler for like 2 or 3 minutes, just to get a little more browning on the top. This is at a fairly low oven. We've got it at 350, right? Like it's not gonna get that brown for us. So I will say, I'm not gonna do it right now, but that's what I would do. All right, let me just make some room and then we're gonna start talking cheese and charcuterie.
Now, Heather, this was another thing that came up pretty common in the responses. What people like to do for their spreads is something that involves the cheese or meat platters.
Yes, I know, I saw that, which I thought was great. Good. Maybe, I mean, we might not be teaching anybody anything new, but maybe we will.
I do like, though, that there's some things that we're trying to focus on adding onto this, like the spinach and artichoke dip, the spiced nuts, or the onion jam. There were some other talks of other things like doing a pepper jelly or creating some type of additional jams, which was very nice.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm going to talk about my jam situation here in a second. I got to just get all my supplies ready. So I have a lot of stuff here today. Actually, here, let me keep this over here. We're going to start with the cheese. So one thing that I think is important to mention, and I haven't fully decided how I'm going to do this yet, but I think I might just set it up right here on my big wood cutting board. You know, you can see this like little long tray with a little rimmed edge. That could be nice. I also have this platter here. I will say having something with a rimmed edge can be helpful in terms of corralling things. So right now I have a lot of these things in bowls, but ideally I'm going to put some of this loose so that it has that really beautiful look that you've probably seen all over Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, whatever. Recipe blogs, all that kind of good stuff. But it can be done just straight on if you've got a nice wood board. They do make special boards that have a lip or a rim, which can be helpful. I do just need to grab my plastic cutting board, because I'm gonna have a few cheeses that I do want to talk about and show you how we're gonna deal with them. So let's bring this back so you can see. All right, so what are we working with today? As I mentioned, we have Camembert. So Camembert, it's a French cheese. It has this bloomy rind. That is what this style of rind is called, where it has that powdery kind of look to it. It's obviously looks a lot like brie, if you've ever had brie. So similar. I will say brie is definitely going to be milder and has like a very creamy, buttery taste, whereas Camembert is going to be deeper, more earthy, intense flavor. I would tell you, I'm smelling it right now. It's a little funky. If you do not like funky cheese, I would stick with brie and not do the Camembert. Part of why I bought this, to be honest with you, was that it was on sale. So keep that in mind. As I mentioned on the, if you've seen the little like prep document, we talk about thinking about different varieties of cheese in terms of both like flavor, but also texture. So hopefully you'll notice I've got a lot of different things going on here. We've got this creamy action in the Camembert. We also have some nice creaminess in our goat cheese, which is that same goat cheese I used in the tarts. As we said, this is what we would call a chèvre. It's a fresh goat cheese. The cool thing about goat's milk, is that you can actually make any kind of cheese out of goat's milk, but this is what people typically think of when they think of goat cheese, right? It's that really moist, creamy texture. It's got a little tang. What's interesting is goat's milk actually is slightly higher in fat and minerals than cow's milk, but it has less lactose. So that's interesting. And as I said, yeah, you can use goat's milk to make anything. So I could make a goat cheddar, I could make a goat brie, I could make a goat Gouda, but like in this case, we're going to stick with this soft, creamy baby there. The next cheese, which this might actually be one of my one of my all-time favorites. This is a Manchego. So this is going to be what we would consider a semi-soft. I don't know if you can tell, but it's got some wiggle there, right? Like it's got a little flexibility. It is a Spanish cheese. It's aged and it is made from sheep's milk, typically. This does have a waxed rind. And the reason you'll know Manchego is by this pattern. This is the pattern that you will see, that kind of like zigzag basket weave design. Sometimes it'll have more of a red tone. Sometimes it has this brown. I will say, it's funny. I was doing some research just to make sure I was fully prepared for this class. And everything I found online did say you should remove the rind before eating, which sort of surprised me because I've definitely eaten this rind many times. It didn't kill me, so I think it's okay, but it's probably good to keep in mind. Amber, I'm sorry. Did you happen to set a timer for me on my tarts by any chance?
We have about 3 more minutes.
All right, I'll take a little peeky peek. Okay, yeah, 3 minutes I think is going to be perfect. Okay, while I'm talking about this, let me show you one cool thing that we can do as far as cutting this and setting it up so we have it looking nice on our platter. So I am going to go ahead and cut off the side piece of rind. And then for a cheese like this, we really just want to cut it into some little wedges. I'm not going too thin. As I said, this has been out now and my kitchen's very hot, so it is pretty soft. You can do this when it is a little harder, although with a cheese like this, sometimes it gets a little too crumbly if you try to cut it really cold. This cheese, one of the things I really like about it is that it pairs well. I'm trying to think how to describe the flavor of this and like what it pairs well. I love it with apple. It's so good with apple. But it's also good with any of your jams or jellies. Okay, I'm going to stop there just so that in the interest of time, I can do what I need to do. Okay, so you may have seen this online. This is a really fun little thing you can do. So basically, I'm going to take my wedges and I'm just going to line them up crisscross. So like one going this way, one going this way. And this will just be a little fun thing we can do for how we can display them on our board. For this purpose, I would leave the rind on at this point because I do think it looks nice. But certainly if you are worried that your guests will not know what to do and they will try to eat that rind, you may want to go ahead and cut it off beforehand. All right, what's next? I also have this beautiful aged Gouda, which kind of crumbled apart, but that's okay because I want to kind of show you that this is a great cheese for just sort of crumbling into chunks like this. I did also want to keep the cheese intact so that we could talk about this rind. So, you know, Gouda, or sometimes it's pronounced Gouda if, you know, you have a Dutch person, which is where this cheese comes from. It tends to have this wax rind. If you've ever had those little mini Baby Bell cheeses, you know that they come in that little wax coating, right? So whether the Gouda is aged or more like young, it's going to have this wax. We don't want to eat that. So we just want to stick to the actual cheese part. And I mean, this is a very aged cheese. You know, you can think about the texture being, you know, almost like a Parmesan in terms of its crumbly nature. So I think serving it that way is going to be really pretty. It's really fun too, to think about different, not only these different textures and flavors that we're working with, but also visually, you know, making sure we have differentiation on our platter. If you've never had aged Gouda, just know it's like regular Gouda. It just has a more intense, nuttier flavor. Let's see. I have my blue cheese. You probably know what blue cheese is. You probably either love it or you hate it. It's a very divisive cheese, this one. You know, it's pungent and stinky. People either really like it or not. It's made by adding mold spores to the cheese. Yes, that is true. Penicillium is what they use for that. Added during ripening. You know, it can definitely go anywhere from soft and creamy to more like crumbly and sharp flavored. You may have heard it by different names too. You have the French cheese, which is Roquefort, Italian Gorgonzola, or English cheese would be referred to as Stilton, all blue cheeses.
Heather, we're going to check the oven.
Oh yeah, let's check it. Thank you. Ooh, looking cute. I'm actually gonna leave it. Can you set me 2 more minutes?
Absolutely.
2 more minutes, I think that just needs a little more time. Okay, I did add another cheese because I had it in my fridge. This is also just like an aged cheddar situation. And what I did was I cut some of it up into cubes, and then I left some into more of these stick shapes because I thought it might be fun to have some different options. All right, we talked about the cheese. Now let's talk about the meat. And I think this is a great transition point to bring up the fact that people will often say they are having a charcuterie board. Really what you're having is probably a cheese and charcuterie board, because technically charcuterie refers to our cured meats. So if we are incorporating cheese, just to call it a charcuterie board would technically be inaccurate. So that's a little fun fact you can share with people if they did not know this. Let's talk a little bit today. I have 2 options. You know, you definitely don't need to have, you know, a bunch of different options, but I thought these were 2 good choices because they are very different from each other. So I have my prosciutto here. Prosciutto is Italian. It actually translates literally just to ham in Italian. It's a cured pork leg. You'll note, you know, it's always cut very thin. Oh my gosh, this is actually 2 pieces. Can you believe it? It's always cut very, very thin. It's basically the way they make this is they take a pork leg and they cover it in salt. It's almost so thin you can see through it. That draws out moisture. It also protects it from any harmful bacteria. It also results in a more concentrated, delicious, like salty flavor. But if you've ever had prosciutto, you know it's also kind of sweet and delicate. So this is a really fun one to include. Now, I think like real true blooded Italian people would say like, please do not cook this, but obviously you've probably had from time to time, you know, this can be cooked and crisped, but for this purpose, we would leave it raw like this. And then I like to just sort of think about, you know, when we are going to display it, we'll just sort of bundle it up into a little pile. The other thing I have today is a soppressata. So this is a dry cured Italian pork-based salami. Hopefully you can see this one has a lot of whole, like big pieces of black peppercorn, which make it kind of fun. you can do whatever you want, right? Like there's so many different types of meats and salamis. You know, you can go Spanish and do chorizo. You can stick to the more Italian. I do want to just show you how people can make this look a little cuter when we're laying it out. So you can fold it in half again, grab your little piece. Then we're going to make another one. They call this a little bit of like a tulip. So then I'm going to fan it out like a little deck of cards, right? I have the next one that I put slightly off center, and then I just keep going. And then depending on where we're going to put this on our board, we can lay it out and it looks cute like that. Okay. All right. Let's get to doing some quick
Oven.
Yeah, let's check the oven and then we'll do some quick assembly.
You have time. You're doing good.
These are looking tray cute. Hopefully you can kind of tell. We got our cheese got nice and melty. You got just a little browning on the edge. You know, the thing is these phyllo cups, they're already technically cooked. Now, if you wanted to fill your phyllo cup with something that was like a cold filling or something that didn't need to be baked and hot and gooey, what you would want to do in that case is pre-bake the empty tart and then just add your cold filling. They make, honestly, you can do great desserts in them, like put a little chocolate mousse action in there. You can do so much fun stuff. Okay. I'm going to talk about, I just realized too, one thing, hold on. I really feel like this is going to add to my board, and I totally forgot it earlier, which is my apple. I also will say that my plan was to have carrot sticks cut up, and I left the carrot at work, so no carrot sticks today, but in an ideal world, I would have put those on. I'm going to just slice up an apple, and I just want to show you one little idea you can do. So if you look at the apple and think about taking off, you know, the two fat sides, basically, then laying it flat, we can make some really nice thin little slices, which will be super yummy for people to eat. But I can also, I'm going to try to keep them together. We're going to, well, this one probably won't work. One thing I saw online, which I thought was very cute, is that after making these little thin slices, you can spread it out to sort of be the shape of a little heart. Let's see if I can do it. I don't know if this apple is super heart shape, but maybe something like that, which I don't know if you can like really see that. Instead of that, I'm probably going to do something where I just use these and fan them out really nicely to add to my board. All right, let's get to it. All right, so when you're doing your board, you do want to think about composition in terms of like having the different types of cheeses, of course. I changed my mind. I'm not going to use this. You want to have different elements. You want to try to have different colors, flavors, textures, but you also want to think about like putting things near each other that go well together. So for example, if I do this one and I have my little Manchego here, as I told you, the apple goes really nice with the Manchego. So it would be nice if I put my little fanned out apple near there. Another thing that goes great with that would be jam. This is a sour cherry jam. I'll put him in the corner. Let's add some different textures. So I'll do like some of this crumbly aged Gouda over here. I will say with something like a brie, I wouldn't recommend putting like a whole round of brie on your tray. It's always good to think about either cutting it into a wedge, cutting it in half, maybe cutting a wedge out of it, something to give it a head start so that people, you know, kind of feel empowered to work with it. I know that, I don't know what it is, but sometimes people, when they see the whole thing, they just don't even want to be the first one to try to mess with it. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, one thing I can do is fill in with some extras. So extras that I have today, I've got couple different nut options, including the nuts that I made, which I am gonna grab a little handful of these. So we have our great little candied nuts here. I also have some of these Marcona almonds. They're fancy. I mean, honestly, you don't need to have a lot of fancy stuff. Like, I also have a ton of stuff here. It is really not necessary to have this many things. I just wanted to show people options. But I have these Marcona almonds. They're like they have a little bit of oil and salt on them. They're very delicious. But then I also just have like some plain old pistachios. I've got some really nice dried fruit. This is dried apricots. Any dried fruit would be great. Fresh fruit, obviously, always a good option. I've got some grapes here. Let's see, I want to add a couple of these crackers. I've got 2 different kinds of crackers today. So I got this like kind of nutty option that has like a lot of stuff going on. I also have these long sticks that are more like a flatbread style. Maybe I'll just lay those sort of like right like that. And then I'm gonna do some filling in with some of these other components. I've got some strawberries, which shockingly, we have local Louisiana strawberries are at the market. I grabbed these, was that yesterday or the day before, Amber? I don't remember now. Those are awesome. Let's put a little prosciutto too down on this end. And then I'm gonna fill in, I think, with a few little apricots. We'll put back here. And then I've got a little hole, so I'm just gonna throw some little pistachios. So I'm gonna make like 2 little smaller boards. I mean, look at that. That was not challenging. Let's see, I have a few little extra spots too. I'm gonna throw some grapes on. Just some good old fashioned grape action. Who doesn't like grape with cheese, right? So, you know, you can make this as fancy or as not fancy as you want. You can make it, honestly, there's a lot of videos online with recommendations of how you can definitely keep cost in mind, you know, what types of cheeses you can look for. You certainly also use the guide that I put on the sheet about how many cheeses to serve per person, because you really don't need a lot of different variety, especially if you think, you know, if you have a smaller group, just go for one that's maybe a little bit of a harder cheese and then one that's a little bit of a softer cheese. All right, that's looking cute. I'm gonna set this aside, and then what I'm gonna do is, on my big platter here, I'm gonna do another display. So I have some olives. Olives are a great thing to add to a cheese plate. These are a Castelvetrano, which is one of the only olives that I will personally eat because I'm kind of picky about olives. But these are really delicious. If you are also someone that doesn't love olives, give them a try. Let's see. All right, so I'm gonna go with, put a little blue cheese in the corner. We'll do some of our little cheddar situation. I might just stack these up kind of like right in the middle. Maybe do something like this, okay? And then I'll put a little blob of this goat cheese. Hopefully you can see, I'm gonna back that up a little bit. Let me just rinse my hands off. Now, what we could do that would actually be pretty fun, grab my mitt, is I can actually go ahead and incorporate my little tarts right onto my tray here. Why not? So this can be part of the action.
Heather, do you know if they sell these shells in any larger sizes?
What you mean, bigger portion size or bigger I mean, I'm sorry, do you mean like bigger like this or just like more to a pack?
No, bigger size.
I have not seen the phyllo shells in a bigger size. What I have seen are puff pastry pre-made shells that are a bit bigger, that would be more for like definitely something more hearty to serve as an appetizer kind of situation. But I have not seen the phyllo in the bigger size, no.
Thank you, thank you.
You are welcome. Okay, so as I keep assembling this, Amber, do we have any final other thoughts we want to? address. Ooh, this is my fig habanero jam. Delicious. But yeah, I know we said pepper jelly also. Love me some pepper jelly. We could do some like pimento cheese even, whether that's homemade or store-bought. You know, you really can do anything here with this. So many options. And you know, if I was doing this and people were coming over, I would have this all done and ready before they get there. Pop it back in the fridge. Easy peasy. I will say too, you know, having these like sort of like larger size pieces of the meat help to make that fan situation a little bit easier. I think if you have, oh, let's do some of these babies. If you have the smaller pieces that are more like what you would think of with pepperoni, they may be a little bit trickier to do the folding that you want to do. What am I missing? What am I missing? Oh, grapes. And, you know, by all means, you can put a whole cluster of grapes. Probably want to think about not making the cluster too big, just so that people can grab it and serve themselves.
No, Heather, I know you were mentioning to me about what you can do if you're trying to make like serving sizes of this.
Yes. I'm going to show that. Let me just throw these little nuts on here. I want to mention one last thing before I move on to that though, Amber, and that is that you really do need to think about making sure that you have serving capabilities. So I'm going to be honest, I don't have a lot of options for this, but like, you know, if you have any of these little spreaders, making sure that you have those near those cheeses that are going to need that. You know, your little jams, if you don't have fancy little, you know, mini spoons, just have a regular spoon. It's totally fine. Whatever you have will ultimately work. All right, I'm going to set that there. And then, yes, let's talk about another option. If you do not want to make a big platter like this, what you can do. And I am going to just pull this over now that we've got some final stuff. So I've got my spinach artichoke dip, got my little homemade chippies here, which are great. Okay. You know, having some kind of little toothpicks nearby, not a bad idea. These are little fancy ones, but you can just use regular ones as well. This is something I threw together earlier. Hopefully you can see that there. This is a little individual serving size of a little charcuterie situation. So, you know, if you were having a party where maybe you don't want people grazing so much over a big platter like this, maybe you're worried about lots of people's hands in the food, whatever reason you have, there's plenty of reasons why you could go this route, but it was super easy, right? I took a clear plastic cup, put some grapes in the bottom, put some nuts. I made a little toothpick here with some cheese, the apricot, and a little piece of salami. Threw a strawberry in just because it looks cute. Got my little crackers. Great option, I think. Let me bring back over my other cheese board. I gotta say, what a spread.
This is awesome, Heather. You did such a great job.
Thanks. I was kind of winging it there on the assembly. I didn't know how that was gonna go. I knew I had all my stuff ready. All right. Do we have any parting thoughts? I'm gonna throw the rest of my little tarts on just as a little plate. The thing I really like about this size for the phyllo cups is that they really are very like bite size. Little like 1 to 2 bite servings, which is nice. I mean, what a spread.
Awesome. We don't have any last minute things in the comments. So
Okay.
looks like that you did it such a thorough job. There's definitely a lot of inspiration happening, a lot of really great responses.
Well, hopefully y'all enjoyed this. Hopefully maybe you'll think about some of these things as you're thinking about your holiday spread this year. Yeah, and keep in touch, check out what we've got going on our website. We'll always have announcements of things. You can sign up for information for our mailing list so that you get notified of future opportunities, whether they be virtual like this or in person if you're here locally with us in New Orleans. Cool. We finished right on time.
That never happens. Like, it happens every now and then, Heather. It's the Christmas miracle.
It's a holiday miracle. It's a holiday miracle. Oh yeah. Let's see what this is looking like. So I'll sort of pull this over here. It's very, you see it really cooked down and got very jammy. So what I'll do with this batch is I will go ahead and transfer this into some small jars and pawn it off on people that I like.
Excellent.
I think I need to try something.
All right. Well, with that being
Happy holidays, everybody.
I'm going to end the recording. We hope that